In the heart of Gold Town, a village named for its lush golden fields and the shimmering river that ran through it, twins James and John stood before the mighty oracle, Ifa. The villagers had gathered to witness the sacred 15th birthday ceremony, where the oracle would reveal the destinies of the young men. The air crackled with anticipation as the crowd buzzed, whispering about the future of the twins, who were so different yet so connected. The oracle, draped in sacred robes and surrounded by the smoke of burning incense, raised his hands to the sky. His voice boomed, echoing through the silent crowd. James, son of the sun, your destiny is to be a king. You shall lead your people with wisdom and strength. The villagers murmured in awe, their hopes rising with James's future. James stood tall, his chest puffed out with pride. A satisfied smile spread across his face. He could already feel the weight of the crown resting upon his head. His heart swelled with confidence, as if destiny had already claimed him. Then the oracle turned his gaze to John. John, son of the earth, your destiny is to serve. You shall toil in the fields, bound by the chains of labor, with no glory to claim. The words hit like a thunderclap. John recoiled, a fire igniting in his chest, his face hardened with disbelief and defiance. The villagers exchanged uneasy glances, whispering in hushed tones, but John's mind raced with one singular thought. I will change this. The oracle's words lingered in the air long after the ceremony had ended. James basked in the admiration of the villagers, who treated him with reverence. They showered him with gifts, offered him words of praise, and spoke of the great future that awaited him. John, on the other hand, was met with pity and, in some cases, disdain. Some villagers avoided his gaze, as though his perceived fate might somehow taint them. Others whispered cruelly about how he would amount to nothing. James, convinced by the oracle's words, felt his future was assured. I am destined to rule, he told himself. But as the months passed, he grew complacent. Why strive for anything when his crown was already guaranteed? He indulged in luxury, neglecting the lessons and challenges a king must face. He relied on others to handle the complexities of governance, resting on the belief that he would naturally be respected as a ruler. He often spent his days in idleness, surrounded by admirers who flattered him. When elders of the village offered to teach him about leadership, diplomacy, and strategy, James waved them off, saying, there will be time for that later. His belief in his preordained greatness blinded him to the work required to achieve it. John, on the other hand, felt the sting of his fate deeply. He could not accept the life of a servant, so he made a decision that would change everything. One night, under the cover of darkness, he packed a small bag of belongings and ran away from Gold Town, determined to forge a path for himself, one that would defy the oracle's prediction. His heart burned with the desire to prove that destiny was not something to be handed to him. It was something to be fought for. John journeyed deep into the wilderness, beyond the reach of Gold Town. He found himself in a remote, forgotten valley, a place untouched by the hands of men. Here the earth was fertile, the land wide and open, and John felt the pulse of life beneath his feet. In this solitude, he began a new life, not as a servant, but as a farmer, a creator of abundance. At first, the work was grueling. The valley, though beautiful, was wild and unforgiving. John had no tools, no guidance, and no one to rely on but himself. He fashioned makeshift tools from branches and stones, learning through trial and error. Each failure taught him something new, and each small success fueled his determination. With his own hands, John transformed the land. He planted crops that flourished in the rich soil, built irrigation systems that channeled the mountain streams, and created an oasis where none existed before. He learned the ways of nature, becoming attuned to its rhythms, its cycles of life and death. Years passed. John became a master farmer, his fields vast and fruitful, stretching as far as the eye could see. Yet, despite his success, a sense of loneliness gnawed at him. He had no one to share his triumphs with. He had no one to witness the world he had created. But in the quiet of the valley, he found peace in the work itself, knowing that he was the master of his own destiny. Back in Gold Town, James had come into his role as king, but with little understanding of what true leadership required. His rule was marked by lavish feasts, endless celebrations, and idle days spent in the palace. The people whispered behind his back, concerned by his detachment. There were murmurs of food shortages, of trade routes becoming unreliable, of a kingdom slipping into decline. But James did not listen. When famine struck Gold Town, it hit with a ferocity no one expected. The crops failed, the river ran low, and hunger spread across the land. The villagers looked to their king for guidance, but James was slow to act. His arrogance had blunted his instincts, and he relied on advisors who only told him what he wanted to hear. "The crops will recover," James told his people. "We will make do with what we have." But the famine worsened. People began to leave the village in search of food, desperate to survive. The once proud kingdom of Gold Town began to fall apart, its strength withering like the crops that once fed it. As the famine spread, Gold Town's council sent out messengers to neighboring lands in search of food. They journeyed far and wide through wild forests and across desolate plains until they stumbled upon John's hidden valley. At first, they were astounded. This unknown, solitary farmer had cultivated more than they could have imagined. His fields were lush, abundant, and untouched by the famine that had ravaged the land. The messengers quickly realized that this farmer was the key to saving their people. John was hesitant at first to return to Gold Town. "I left that place to escape my fate," he told them. "Why should I go back?" But the messengers begged him, explaining how Gold Town was on the brink of collapse. The kingdom he once left was now in dire need of his skills. "Only you can save us," they pleaded. Reluctantly, John agreed, realizing that his work in the valley was never just about surviving. It was about preparing for this very moment. The land had taught him the value of patience, of growth, and now he would return to lead. When John arrived back in Gold Town, the people were stunned. Here stood a man who had transformed the earth itself, a man whose wisdom was written in the soil beneath his feet. The villagers were desperate, their bellies empty, their hope waning. John did not seek glory, but he brought with him the knowledge and resources to save them. He guided them to his hidden valley, teaching them how to farm the land, how to work with the cycles of nature. The famine began to subside as Gold Town was reborn, its fields once again lush with crops. As Gold Town flourished under his guidance, the people began to see John not as a mere farmer, but as the true leader they had always needed. His wisdom, his humility, and his ability to unite them became the foundation upon which Gold Town was rebuilt. Meanwhile, James's kingdom was in chaos. The famine continued to ravage the land, and his inability to make the hard decisions had left him vulnerable. One day, the villagers rose up in revolt, demanding action. James, who had been living in his palace, was captured and stripped of his crown. The people, once loyal, now saw him as a king who had failed them. James was cast into the very fields he had once taken for granted, his title erased, his power lost. His fate was sealed, not as the king he was born to be, but as a laborer, a servant of the very people he once ruled. As John sat on the throne of Gold Town, the sun setting over the golden fields, he reflected on his journey. His path was not one of easy glory, it was one of hard work, struggle, and sacrifice. He understood now that destiny was not something written in the stars or spoken by oracles. It was something that must be earned, shaped by the choices we make. James, now a simple laborer in the fields, learned the same lesson. His destiny was not given to him. It was a result of his complacency, his belief that his birthright would save him. In the end, John's rise to the throne was not about fulfilling a prophecy. It was about defying it, creating his own fate through resilience and determination. His story was one of true leadership, born not from destiny, but from the strength of his will. There you have it, kids. The legend of the twin brothers, one destined for greatness, the other for servitude, lives on as a tale of the power of choice. Destiny is not a chain. It is the road we walk, and we walk it one step at a time. And so the story of James and John lives on, not as a cautionary tale, but as an inspiring legend passed down through generations.